David O. Selznick was one of the most prolific Hollywood producers of the 1930s and 40s, producing such classics as A Star is Born in 1937, Gone with the Wind in 1939, and Rebecca in 1940. The latter was directed by Alfred Hitchcock, who Selznick brought over from the UK and signed to a 5-movie deal. Selznick didn't start from the bottom though. His dad Louis was a famous silent movie producer. Additionally, early in his career, Selznick would marry the daughter of the co-founder of MGM, the most prestigious studio in Hollywood at the time. By this time, he was only 31 years old and had produced several major successes, including King Kong. In 1935, Selznick formed his own studio, Selznick International Pictures. He leased RKO Studios and Backlot and distributed his films through United Artists. This is where Selznick found most of his success, peaking with the American classic Gone with the Wind, which, depending on who you ask, and inflation and other math that I'm not quite sure about, it's the highest grossing film of all time. However, the success of Gone with the Wind may have been the beginning of Selznick's decline, as he would chase that high for the rest of his career. Disclaimer, this film is a product of its time. It takes brownface and other ethnic and racial prejudices.
It's me, so dunk.
It was with Duel in the Sun that Selznick hoped he would have his magnum opus. In order to know what went wrong with Duel in the Sun, you first need to know a little bit about two things: old Hollywood and Selznick's personality. During Selznick's time, studios put producers in charge of all the important creative endeavors. Screenwriters and directors were interchangeable and not seen as a big part of the creative process. This was perfect for Selznick, who was a control freak. He took advantage of his producer role, controlling nearly every aspect of his movies. Duel in the Sun would be no different when it began filming in 1945 near Tucson, Arizona. This was Selznick's project. Not only did he produce it, he wrote the script, which was based on a 1944 novel by Nevin Bush. The production employed a huge cast and crew, with big names like Jennifer Jones, Joseph Cotten, Lionel Barrymore, and Gregory Peck, with Orson Welles providing narration.
Deep among the lonely, sun-baked hills of Texas, the great and weather-beaten stone still stands.
Peck could tell early on in the shoot that the project was consuming Selznick, stating that he was pumping Duel in the Sun full of showmanship with an outsized cast and an enormous production budget, and I knew that he was intent on making Jones a great star, creating a movie that would overtake his wildly successful Gone with the Wind. To direct Duel in the Sun, Selznick enlisted King Vidor. Vidor was a prolific director whose career started in the silent era and continued successfully into the sound era. Vidor's rise to fame began with The Big Parade in 1925, La Boheme in 1926, and The Crowd in 1928. He also created Hallelujah in 1929, the first major motion picture by a studio with an all-black cast. While progressive at the time, it does not hold up. Vidor was unique because he believed that the movie director had a voice and an artistic vision, contrary to the popular sentiment with Hollywood studios and Selznick's vision at the time. A clash here was inevitable. To say that Selznick was hands-on would be an understatement. He did not like to delegate his work and didn't trust those around him. As a result, he would continuously meddle in the work of the crew, who had their areas of expertise constantly questioned by the producer.
Everyone in David's orbit had their lives torn apart by his work habits, his inability to delegate.
Selznick became a menace on set, making changes to the script on a daily basis. During one pause in production, Selznick revised the script, adding 75 scenes and reordering shoots of many others. Selznick did everything in his power to ensure that he had oversight over the production. He gave strict orders that not a single scene was to be filmed until he had been consulted on the lighting, the setup, and the actors. By his own admission, 99 times out of 100, he felt like something had to be changed.
In addition to working for me, you may now praise me as your almighty.
The production wasn't the only thing Selznick was trying to control. He met the starring actress Jennifer Jones early in her career and quickly took control, aiming to mold her into his own image of female perfection. By the time Duel in the Sun started production, he had become enamored with Jones, wanting to ensure that she came through perfect on screen. Selznick made sure the film played to her sexuality, something that she was not comfortable with as it was different from her previous roles. Selznick often pushed Jones very hard during filming in order to get what he wanted. In the final scene of the film, Jones has to drag herself across sharp rocks. Vidor was concerned with her safety and wanted her to have insulated padding. Selznick denied the request, claiming that it would ruin the shot. This resulted in bloody bruises on Jones's arms and stomach. Selznick and Jones would marry in 1949. Jones suffered from mental health problems throughout much of their relationship. She survived a 1967 suicide attempt where she jumped from a cliff in Malibu Beach, and her daughter later committed suicide. Selznick envisioned a lavish production, and that's exactly what he got. The film took 18 months to shoot and had a final budget of over $5 million. For comparison, Gone with the Wind cost approximately $4 million to make. The most expensive movie made in the 1940s was called Forever Amber, which was made in 1947 and made $6.375 million. In addition to its large production budget, an unheard of $2 million budget was spent on advertising. This included public spectacles, like dumping 5,000 tiny parachutes into a crowd at the Kentucky Derby promoting the film. Another strategy Selznick used for promotion was to collect the names of all the bartenders in the cities and towns all over the country. He then hired a team to sit down and write thousands of letters by hand, addressing each bartender by their first name. The letter praised the movie and it was signed by their old buddy Joe. Of course there was no Joe, but they would pass that letter around at the bar and try to figure out who Joe was, advertising the movie in the process.
I'm a stupid moron with an ugly face and a big butt, and my butt smells, and I like to kiss my own butt.
Life magazine called this strategy the most expensive and flamboyant publicity campaign ever generated in Hollywood. Selznick's controlling nature was a big factor in the ballooning production budget, but there were other factors at play. This included a series of strikes by the International Association of Theatrical Stage Employees, the Screen Actors Guild, and the Teamsters Union. These issues continued all the way up to the release of the film when they were hampered by a strike at the Technicolor factory. Eventually, Selznick's overbearing involvement became too much for Vidor. Tempers boiled over when Selznick added stage blood to his scene because he deemed it not dramatic enough. Vidor quit on the spot and did not return, believing that Selznick's obsession with Jones had clouded his judgment. A slew of new directors were brought in to replace Vidor, 7 in total. Additionally, 6 cinematographers were used in the production. But the drama didn't end there. Selznick's name was generally associated with family classics and love stories, while Duel in the Sun was described as having an unhealthy eroticism and flaming bad taste by critics at the time. This was largely due to the sexualization of Jones and depictions of rape. In 1945, Variety called it a raw, sex-laden Western pulp fiction, and the trade papers gave it the nickname Lust in the Dust. Side note, Lust in the Dust would later be the title of a comedy western released in 1984, starring Divine from Pink Flamingo's fame.
Kill everyone now. Condone first-degree murder. Advocate cannibalism. Eat shit. Filth are my politics. Filth is my life.
Objections to the film were raised by the National League of Decency, a Catholic organization dedicated to identifying objectionable content in motion pictures. As a result, Selznick was forced to make 56 cuts, including an erotic dance number from Jones. Notorious Memphis film censor Lloyd Binford called Duel in the Sun the most repellent film I've seen this year. It contains all of the impurities of the foulest human dross. It is sadism at the deepest level. It is the flesh pots of Pharaoh, modernized and filled to the overflowing. It is the mental and physical putrefaction on the march, but nearing the end of the final decomposition. However, I wouldn't put much stock into what Binford says, as he previously prohibited a film because it portrayed a race-integrated classroom. Orders came back to admit such lines as, "I get that kind of service from my studs," and "I want to lie where you're the softest." Duel in the Sun finally premiered at LA's Egyptian Theater on December 30th, 1946, with a planned wide release of May 7th, 1947. However, prior to the release, the film had suffered from negative word of mouth as reports of production problems appeared in the press. In order to combat this, Selznick partnered with a distributor to implement a saturation strategy. Movie openings were not like they are today, where a single film can open worldwide on the same day. Selznick's strategy would consist of opening in several big cities simultaneously with an accompanying publicity tour. This would allow the movie to get ahead of potential bad word of mouth. Despite all of its setbacks, the strategy proved successful. The box office totaled $9 million 6 months after the film's release. While not the spectacle or the financial success that Gone with the Wind was, Selznick did end up in the black, while Jennifer Jones and Lillian Gish received nominations for Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress. Selznick went on to produce 8 more films before his death of a heart attack in 1965, but never reached the success of Gone with the Wind. Vidor went on to make several more successful movies, including Ruby Gentry in 1952, Japanese War Bride in 1952, and reuniting with Selznick with War and Peace in 1956. Alfred Hitchcock, after fulfilling his contractual obligations with Selznick, made dozens of movies, including Vertigo, Psycho, The Birds, becoming one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. While Duel in the Sun received mixed reviews and unwanted attention from censors upon its release, it has been re-evaluated by critics in recent years, most notably by director Martin Scorsese. He says about the film, "For some strange reason, the film was very effective on me. To this day, I love the picture. I thought it was just phenomenal. Granted, it's trash down to the very bone, the very core, the very marrow, but wonderful, just wonderful. I prefer the excess and the hysteria there." Well, that's about it. There's a lot more to this movie, but I didn't want this running too long. If this was interesting to you, I recommend watching it on YouTube. A bunch of people have uploaded it for free. And remember, stay stupid.